You stopped fighting for the relationship and everything changed. Not slowly, not subtly, not in ways you had to strain to notice. The shift was immediate and obvious, and completely disorienting to the avoidant, who thought they knew exactly how this would go. You were supposed to keep trying. You were supposed to keep pursuing them, despite their distance. Keep hoping they'd change despite all evidence they wouldn't. Keep investing in potential that was never going to actualize. That's what everyone else did. That's what the pattern had been for years. The avoidant withdraws, the other person pursues harder. The avoidant maintains comfortable distance while the other person exhausts themselves trying to close it. Eventually, the other person leaves depleted, and the avoidant moves on unbothered. But you didn't follow the script. You just let go. Clean, final, complete letting go, where one day you were trying and the next day you weren't. Where the effort stopped so abruptly it was like a switch flipped inside you. And the avoidant, who was prepared for your continued pursuit, who had their defenses ready for your emotional appeals, who expected months of slow fade, where they maintained control. That avoidant is now experiencing something they've never experienced before. Panic. Real panic about losing you, about having already lost you, about the letting go being so complete that there's no opening for them to slip back in when they change their mind about wanting distance. What happened when you let go is the avoidant's entire defensive structure collapsed, because it was built on the assumption that you'd keep holding on. They could be distant because you'd be close. They could withdraw because you'd pursue. They could be unavailable because you'd remain available. The defense worked as long as you were doing your part, as long as you were the counterbalance to their withdrawal, as long as your effort compensated for their lack of effort, as long as the relationship existed because you were maintaining it single-handedly. But you let go. You stopped compensating. You removed your effort. And without your effort, the relationship didn't just weaken, it ceased to exist entirely. The avoidant is discovering that what they thought was mutual relationship was actually just you, was sustained solely by your trying, was never going to survive both people being passive, because they were always passive, and now you're passive too, and there's nothing left. The discovery is devastating to their ego, which needs to believe they're important, they're valued, they're missed. Your letting go is proving they're none of those things, or at least they're not those things enough to make you keep trying when trying isn't reciprocated. The immediate shock of your letting go that they didn't see coming. The first thing that happened when you let go is silence where the avoidant expected noise. They expected texts asking why they're distant, calls trying to reconnect, emotional confrontations about their behavior. They were prepared for your pain, your anger, your desperate attempts to understand what went wrong and fix it. Their defenses were ready. They had explanations rehearsed, justifications prepared, ways to deflect and minimize and make it about you being too needy rather than them being too unavailable. But you gave them none of that. You just went silent. Completely, immediately silent in ways that communicated something fundamentally different from the silence of someone who's hurt and waiting to be pursued. Your silence had finality in it. It had decision in it. It had the quality of door closing, not door being left open for them to walk back through when they felt like it. The silence shocked them because it was so unlike what they were expecting, so different from how everyone else had responded to their withdrawal. So clearly not a bid for their attention, but rather a withdrawal of your attention from them permanently. The shock intensified when they checked your social media and found no evidence of suffering, no posts about heartbreak, no indication you're destroyed by the ending. They expected to see pain, because watching you be in pain would validate their importance, would confirm they mattered enough that losing them hurt you. But your social media shows you living, not performing living to make them jealous, just actually living. You're with friends, you're pursuing interests, you're clearly doing fine in ways that don't reference them at all, don't suggest you're thinking about them, don't indicate the ending is occupying any significant space in your current experience. The absence of visible pain is more disturbing to them than dramatic pain would be, because dramatic pain would mean you're still emotionally engaged with them, still processing the relationship, still affected by them. But your fineness suggests you've moved on. You're not processing because there's nothing left to process. You're not affected because you've already released them from your emotional world. They experienced shock when they realized you're not available for the reconciliation they weren't even sure they wanted, but assumed they'd have the option of pursuing. The avoidant operates on assumption that they control the relationship. They decide when to be close, when to be distant, when to end things, when to try again. But your letting go removed their control. They can't decide to try again because you're not available to try again with. They can't pursue reconciliation when they're ready because you're not waiting for them to be ready. The discovery that they don't have the option of you anymore, that the choice has been made and they're not the one who made it. That control has shifted completely. This is shock that's threatening their entire identity as person who's always in control of relationship dynamics. You were supposed to wait. You were supposed to be available when they decided they wanted you back. You let go instead, and the letting go took away the option they assumed they'd always have. The shock includes them realizing you're not asking mutual friends about them, not trying to get information about whether they're okay, or what they're thinking, or whether they regret how things ended. They expected you'd be checking on them through other people, staying updated on their life, maintaining connection through the social network even if you weren't maintaining it directly. But friends are reporting back that you're not asking, not seeking information, apparently not interested in knowing anything about them. The complete absence of curiosity about them is shocking because it suggests they're not occupying your thoughts, not important enough to wonder about, genuinely released from your concern. The avoidant is used to being thought about even when they're not present, used to occupying space in people's minds even when they're not in people's lives. You're not asking, you're not wondering, you're not seeking information is evidence that they're not in your mind. And not being in your mind means not mattering in ways their ego can't tolerate. The panic that's setting in as they realize what they actually lost. The initial shock is giving way to panic as the avoidant realizes the letting go is real, is permanent, is not strategy you're using to get their attention, but genuine release of them from your life. The panic is qualitatively different from anything they felt before in relationship endings, because previous endings happened on their timeline, under their control, when they were ready, or when the other person finally gave up after long, slow fade, that allowed the avoidant to adjust to the loss gradually. But your letting go was abrupt, was on your timeline, was you taking control and executing the ending before they were ready for it to end. The lack of control combined with the abruptness is creating panic that's flooding their system. Panic about having lost you, panic about not being able to get you back, panic about this loss being different from other losses in ways that make it more painful and more permanent. The panic includes recognition that you were different from other people they've dated, and losing you means losing something they won't find again. Other partners were willing to do all the relationship work, were patient with avoidant patterns, were understanding about limitations, but they weren't as understanding as you, weren't as patient, weren't as capable of seeing past the defenses to the person underneath. You were a combination of qualities that's rare, empathetic enough to understand them, but boundaried enough to leave when understanding wasn't being met with effort to change. Patient enough to give multiple chances, but self-respecting enough to stop giving chances once it was clear chances weren't being used for growth. The avoidant is panicking because they're recognizing through your absence what made you special, what made you different, what made you the partner who could have worked if they'd been capable of meeting you. And recognizing your uniqueness after losing you is creating panic that they've destroyed their best chance at partnership, their best relationship, the person who was most equipped to handle their patterns while still requiring them to grow. The panic is intensifying as they try to move forward and discover they can't because you're in their head constantly. They're thinking about you obsessively, what you're doing, whether you're thinking about them, whether you've met someone else, whether the letting go is truly final, or whether there's possibility of restoration. The obsessive thinking is preventing them from being present in their life, from enjoying anything, from focusing on work or friends, or anything that isn't you and your absence. The panic about losing you is mixing with panic about their own inability to stop thinking about you, their own inability to move on the way you've apparently moved on, their own attachment to you being revealed as much deeper than they admitted while they had you. They're panicking because they're not supposed to be affected this much by someone leaving, not supposed to care this intensely about someone they were maintaining distance from, not supposed to be the one who can't let go when they're the one who created the distance that made you let go. They're experiencing panic about time running out. Every day you're apart is day you're potentially moving further away emotionally, day you're building life without them, day you're potentially meeting someone who can give you what they couldn't give you. The panic about timeline is new to them, because usually they control time. They decide when to reach out, when to try again, when to pursue reconciliation. But they can't control time when you've let go, because your letting go started clock that's ticking toward point where return becomes impossible, because you've moved on too far to be interested in trying again. The panic about timeline is making them want to act, want to reach out, want to try to restore contact, want to stop the clock before it runs out. But the panic is also mixing with their defended patterns that prevent them from acting, leaving them trapped between panic that says do something before it's too late, and defense that says doing something requires vulnerability you can't access. How you're letting go is forcing them to confront what they've been avoiding. Your letting go is forcing the avoidant to sit with loneliness they've been defending against by having you available even while maintaining distance. They could feel independent while you were around because they weren't alone. They were choosing distance while having option of closeness, choosing solitude while having you available when solitude became uncomfortable. But you're gone now, and the solitude is no longer choice, it's consequence. The loneliness they're feeling is different from the comfortable aloneness they've cultivated. This is loneliness that's imposed rather than chosen. Loneliness that comes with recognizing they've lost person they actually wanted, while protecting themselves from wanting them. Loneliness that's forcing them to face that their defended independence isn't satisfying or fulfilling, but is actually isolating them from the connection they need. The loneliness is teacher they can't escape from, and it's teaching them that defense against vulnerability isn't protecting them from pain. It's creating different pain, deeper pain, pain of being alone with themselves and their patterns and their regret. The letting go is forcing them to confront their patterns directly, because the patterns cost them something they value, and the cost is undeniable. While you were there, while you were tolerating the patterns, they could minimize how destructive the patterns were. They could tell themselves the patterns were protective, were necessary, were just who they are, and people should accept them. But you leaving, specifically you leaving, you who understood them and worked with their limitations, is evidence that the patterns are costing them things they can't afford to lose. The patterns aren't protecting them. The patterns are destroying their relationships, isolating them, ensuring they lose everyone who gets close enough to matter. Your letting go is forcing them to see the patterns clearly, because the cost is right in front of them, in form of your absence, in form of relationship that could have worked if they'd been different, in form of person they loved who they lost through being unable to show up. Your letting go is also forcing them to confront that they do attach, they do need, they do care deeply despite performing indifference. The entire avoidant identity is built on not needing anyone, on being fine alone, on not being affected by relationship outcomes. But your letting go is revealing the identity as performance rather than reality. They're not fine, they're affected. They do need, specifically, they needed you. The revelation of their need, the exposure of their attachment, the evidence that they care more than their defended state, allows them to admit, all of this is being forced into consciousness by your absence. They can't maintain the story that they don't need anyone when they're clearly devastated by losing you. They can't perform indifference when they're obsessively thinking about you. They can't claim they're unaffected when your letting go has affected them more than any ending has affected them before. Your absence is holding up mirror, showing them who they actually are underneath the defended performance. And who they actually are is someone who attaches deeply while being terrified of attachment. Someone who needs intensely while being unable to admit need. Someone who's not at all the independent, unbothered person they've been pretending to be. The letting go is forcing them to face that love without capacity is love that fails. That feeling deeply doesn't matter if feeling can't translate into action. That they can love someone intensely while destroying the relationship through inability to show up in ways love should make you willing to show up. They loved you, they know they did, can't deny it now that you're gone, and the love is obvious through how much losing you hurts. But the love didn't prevent them from being distant, from being inconsistent, from being emotionally unavailable. The love didn't make them capable of meeting you, of doing their work, of being partner you deserved. The confrontation with their own incapacity, with the gap between how much they felt and how little they could give, is painful in ways that's hard to sit with. It's easier to believe you're someone who doesn't feel deeply than to believe you're someone who feels deeply but is too broken to act on what you feel. Your letting go is forcing the harder truth. They feel everything, and they're incapable of functioning on their feelings. And that combination is what destroyed the relationship. The specific ways they're trying to undo your letting go, and why it's failing. The avoidant is trying to reach out through the few channels they still have access to, testing whether your letting go is absolute or whether there's opening they can exploit. They're sending messages that seem casual. Hey, how are you? Or saw something that made me think of you, or just checking in. The casualness is strategic. They're trying to restore contact without admitting they want contact. Trying to see if you'll respond without having to acknowledge their behavior is what made you let go. But the casual reach out is failing because you're not responding at all, or you're responding so briefly and neutrally that the response communicates disinterest rather than opening. The failure of casual contact to restore access is teaching them your letting go is serious. is not something they can undo through minimal effort, is not gate they can push open with light pressure because the gate is locked and you're not giving them the key. They're trying indirect pursuit through mutual friends, asking about you, mentioning they've been thinking about reaching out, dropping hints that they regret how things ended. The indirect pursuit is designed to reach you without them having to be vulnerable directly, to test the waters through intermediaries before risking direct rejection. But indirect pursuit is failing because either the friends are shutting it down based on boundaries you've set about not being go-between, or the friends are reporting back that you're genuinely unbothered and not interested in hearing what the avoidant has to say. Each failed attempt at indirect contact is reinforcing that your letting go has cut off all the pathways they usually use to maintain connection, without having to do the vulnerable work of direct pursuit. The indirect routes are closed. The only route is direct vulnerability, and direct vulnerability is what they can't access, so they're trapped with no way to reach you. Some avoidants are trying the grand gesture, the long apology, the confession of feelings, the promise to change. They're reaching out with everything they couldn't say while you were there, hoping that finally saying it will undo the letting go, will make you reconsider, will create opening for trying again. But the grand gesture is failing because it's coming too late, after you've already done the emotional work of releasing them, after you've already moved through the grief and arrived at acceptance. Words that would have mattered deeply while you were still trying don't matter the same way once you've let go, because letting go means you've already processed that words without sustained behavioral change are empty. The grand gesture is being met with silence, or with clear statement that you're not available for trying again, regardless of what they're finally saying. The failure of the grand gesture to move you is teaching them that timing matters, that some opportunities close permanently, that you can't wait until someone lets go to finally offer what they needed before they let go. They're trying to make you jealous by making sure you know they're seeing other people, by posting about their full social life, by performing moved on in ways designed to make you regret letting go. But the jealousy tactic is failing spectacularly, because you're genuinely disinterested in who they're seeing or what they're doing. Your letting go was complete enough that their life is no longer your concern. Their choices don't affect you. Their attempts to make you jealous are just confirming you made right decision by letting go of someone who would try to manipulate you through jealousy, rather than doing actual work to deserve another chance. The jealousy tactic backfiring is particularly painful for the avoidant, because it's proving you're not still emotionally tied to them, not watching their life hoping to be part of it, not affected by the possibility of them with someone else. You let go of them completely enough that what they do with other people is irrelevant to you, and that irrelevance is more devastating than jealousy would be. What's permanently different now that you let go? The power dynamic is permanently reversed. During the relationship, they had power through their withholding. They controlled the pace, the depth, the continuity of connection through deciding when to be available and when to withdraw. But you letting go took all their power. They can't control you anymore. They can't make you pursue through their withdrawal. They can't get your attention through their distance. You have all the power now because you're the one who's unavailable. You're the one who's moved on. You're the one who would have to choose to give them access again for there to be any possibility of reconnection. The permanent power reversal is disorienting to them because they've never been in this position, never been the powerless one, never been the person who wants access to someone who won't grant it. And being in this position is teaching them what they put you through, the powerlessness, the wanting someone who won't make themselves available, the humiliation of pursuing someone who's clearly disinterested. They're permanently changed by having lost you in ways they weren't changed by losing others. Previous relationships ended, but didn't change them because they told themselves those relationships didn't work for various external reasons, incompatibility, bad timing, the other person's issues. But they can't tell themselves those stories about you because you were compatible, the timing was fine, and your issues weren't the problem. Their issues were the problem. Losing you is forcing them to face that they're the common denominator in all their failed relationships, that their patterns are what destroys connection, that they're the problem they need to fix. The permanent change is awareness they can't unknow, awareness that they're destroying their own life through their defended state, that their patterns cost them people they value, that they need professional help to develop capacity they don't currently have. Whether they act on the awareness, whether they pursue therapy, whether the change leads to growth or just to deeper defensiveness, that's still to be determined. But the awareness itself is permanent, planted by your letting go in ways that won't allow them to maintain their previous illusions about their patterns being acceptable or sustainable. Your perception of them is permanently altered, and they know it. They can't go back to being seen by you as someone who's just scared or wounded or going through temporary phase. You see them now as someone who's fundamentally incapable. Someone who had every opportunity to choose differently and chose their patterns instead. Someone who destroyed relationship through conscious repeated choices to stay defended rather than to grow. The permanence of your revised perception is painful because they valued how you saw them. You saw them with compassion, saw their wounds, saw their potential. But your letting go communicated that your perception shifted from compassion to clarity, from seeing potential to seeing actuality. From understanding their wounds to recognizing their wounds don't excuse their impact. They can't get back the version of themselves that existed in your eyes before you let go, because that version required your hope and patience and belief in their capacity to change. And your letting go was final statement that you no longer have any of those things in relation to them. The possibility of you is permanently closed, unless they do intensive therapeutic work that they probably won't do. Most avoidants don't pursue therapy until they've lost multiple people, until the pattern of losses is undeniable, until the pain is severe enough and sustained enough to override their resistance to the vulnerability that therapeutic work requires. Losing you might not be enough to drive them to therapy. It might just drive them to be more defended, to protect themselves more thoroughly against ever caring about anyone this much again. But if they do eventually pursue therapy, if your letting go becomes catalyst that drives them to professional help years from now, the capacity they develop will come too late for you. You'll already have built life with someone else, someone who didn't need to lose you to learn to value you, someone who was capable from the beginning of meeting you, rather than someone who needed years of therapy after losing you to develop capacity you needed while you were there. The permanent closing of possibility of you is the cost of them not doing the work while they had you, and that cost is something they'll carry regardless of whether they eventually grow. The alternate lesson you're letting go is teaching them. Your letting go is teaching them that patience runs out, that accommodation has limits, that even the most understanding person will eventually leave when understanding isn't met with effort to change. They took your patience for granted, assumed it was infinite resource they could draw on forever without having to reciprocate or even acknowledge. But your letting go is proving that patience depletes when it's not honored, that understanding withdraws when it's exploited, that the most patient person in the world will eventually reach their limit and act on that limit by leaving. The lesson is that they can't rely on other people's patience to make up for their lack of growth, can't expect others to wait indefinitely while they refuse to do their work, can't take people for granted because people who know their worth will leave when they're not valued appropriately. The letting go is teaching them that their patterns have real costs, not theoretical costs they can intellectually understand and ignore, but actual losses of actual people they actually cared about. Every previous relationship ending, they could minimize the cost because they told themselves they didn't care that much, the person wasn't that special, the loss wasn't that significant. But they can't minimize the cost of losing you because you were special, they did care intensely, and the loss is devastating in ways they can't pretend away. The real cost being felt in real time, the pain being undeniable and inescapable, the recognition that their patterns destroyed something precious. This is teaching them in ways words never taught them that their defended state isn't protecting them from pain, but is creating pain, is costing them their happiness, is ensuring they end up alone with their patterns and their regrets. Your letting go is teaching them about the irreversibility of consequences. They're used to consequences being temporary, being fixable, being something they could undo through minimal effort when they decided they wanted to undo them. But your letting go is permanent consequence they can't undo. They can't charm their way back into your life. They can't wait you out. They can't promise to change and be believed without evidence of actual change sustained over time they haven't taken to pursue. The permanence of the consequence is teaching them that some damage can't be repaired, that some doors close and don't reopen, that some people leave and don't come back regardless of how much the person who lost them wishes they would come back. The lesson about irreversibility is painful but necessary. They needed to learn that they can't treat people however they want and expect to not lose those people permanently. The alternate lesson is that loving someone isn't enough if you can't love them in ways they can receive. They loved you, they know they did, can't deny it now. But the love stayed trapped inside them, unexpressed and unavailable to you. Useless for building partnership because you couldn't feel it or count on it or base your life on it. Your letting go is teaching them that internal feeling without external expression is not love that functions as love. That caring deeply doesn't matter if caring doesn't translate into showing up. That all the feeling in the world is worthless if you're too defended to let the feeling shape your behavior. The lesson is devastatingly clear. They lost you not because they didn't love you, but because they couldn't love you in ways that created relationship. And inability to translate feeling into function is fundamental incapacity that will cost them every person they love until they do the therapeutic work that develops capacity they don't currently have. You let go and everything changed. For them, not for you. You're fine moving forward, building life without them. They're the one experiencing the change, the panic, the lessons being taught through your absence. Your letting go was end of the relationship and beginning of their education, about consequences, about patterns, about the cost of staying defended when defense destroys everything worth having. What they do with the education, whether they use your letting go as wake-up call that drives them to therapy and transformation, or whether they use it as confirmation that they should be more defended to avoid ever feeling this pain again. That's their choice. Your job was to let go when staying was costing you more than leaving. You did that job. The rest is theirs to figure out, theirs to work through, theirs to learn from or not learn from. You let go. And what happened is you freed yourself from relationship that wasn't meeting you while teaching them lessons they could only learn through losing someone who mattered, while refusing to do what would have made them capable of keeping someone who mattered. The teaching is complete. The letting go is permanent. And you're already gone, already building the life you deserve, with people who can meet you where you are, which is exactly what you should be doing, while the avoidant sits with the lessons your absence is teaching them, whether they're ready to learn or not. The specific moments when the weight of your letting go hits them hardest. The avoidant wakes up, and for the first few seconds of consciousness, they forget you let go. In that brief window between sleep and full awareness, they think about texting you. They plan what they'll say when they see you. They exist in the world where you're still accessible to them. Then reality crashes in. You let go, you're gone. They can't text you, they won't see you. You're not accessible anymore. The morning remembering happens every single day, training their nervous system in the permanence of your absence, forcing them to start each day with the loss instead of with the connection they took for granted. The repetition of loss every morning is accumulating into understanding they can't avoid. This isn't temporary separation, this isn't cooling off period. This is permanent state they have to wake up to indefinitely because you let go completely enough that there's no path back to you. The weight hits them when they experience something they want to share with you and reach for their phone before remembering they can't reach out. They see something funny that you would appreciate. They have thought they want your perspective on. They experience moment they want to process with you because you were the person they processed life with even if they never acknowledged that's what you were. The muscle memory of turning toward you is still operating months after you let go. And each time they turn toward you automatically and meet the wall of your unavailability instead of your response. They're learning viscerally what they lost. They lost their person, the one they shared life with, the one they thought about when things happened, the one whose perspective mattered most even when they were pretending you didn't matter that much. And losing their person, losing the automatic turning toward, losing the sharing of daily life. This loss is hitting them in accumulated small moments throughout each day, rather than as one big grief they could process and move past. The weight crushes them when they try to date someone new and discover they can't stop comparing the new person to you. Every date is comparison that the new person loses. They don't laugh like you, don't understand the avoidant like you did, don't create the same comfort or connection or ease. The avoidant keeps trying to make themselves feel something with these new people, keeps hoping someone will match what they had with you or exceed it, keeps looking for a replacement that would make your letting go hurt less by proving you were replaceable. But you're not replaceable. The comparison is proving it in date after date, where the avoidant feels nothing close to what they felt with you, where every interaction highlights what's missing, where the absence of you is more present than the presence of the person sitting across from them. The failure to replace you is teaching them you weren't generic, weren't interchangeable, weren't just acceptable partner they happened to be with. You were a specific person they connected with most deeply, and losing specific person means losing something that can't be recreated with someone else. The weight becomes unbearable in moments when the avoidant is struggling and has no one to turn to. They're used to having you as their support system even when they didn't acknowledge needing support. You were the person they'd talk to when work was stressful, when family was difficult, when life felt overwhelming. They took your support for granted so completely they didn't recognize they were depending on it until it was gone. Now they're struggling and there's no one who knows them well enough to help, no one they trust enough to be vulnerable with, No one who makes them feel safe the way you made them feel safe, despite their defended exterior. The aloneness in their struggle is teaching them about hidden dependencies they didn't acknowledge while you were meeting those dependencies. They weren't as independent as they performed being. They were depending on you extensively while pretending they didn't need anyone. And losing you means losing the support system they claimed they didn't need, but actually relied on more than they understood. How your letting go is creating a before and after in their life story. The avoidance life is now divided into before you let go and after you let go. And the division is so stark they're experiencing it as different eras of their life rather than as continuous timeline. Before you let go, they had the luxury of taking you for granted while you were there, maintaining the relationship, managing the connection, doing the emotional labor. They could be defended while having someone to be defended with, could maintain distance while having closeness available when distance got uncomfortable, could perform independence while having dependence secretly met through your constant presence. But after you let go, all the luxuries disappeared simultaneously. They're defending with no one to defend against, maintaining distance from no one, performing independence that's become actual isolation, because there's no one there anymore to make the independence feel like choice rather than like consequence. The before was unsustainable but comfortable. The after is sustainable but unbearable. And living in the unbearable after is teaching them that the comfortable before was only possible because you were sacrificing yourself to maintain it. The before and after is also visible in how they relate to other people. Before you let go, the avoidant maintained their defended state with everyone, kept all relationships at surface level, never let anyone get too close. But that pattern was working for them socially because they had you. You were the depth they wouldn't admit to needing. You were the intimacy they couldn't access with others. You were the connection that made superficial relationships with everyone else feel acceptable, because at least they had one deep connection, even if they couldn't acknowledge its depth. After you let go, the superficial relationships aren't enough anymore. The avoidant is recognizing that having only surface-level connections with everyone is lonely, is unfulfilling, is making them feel isolated in ways that weren't obvious when you were providing depth they didn't have with anyone else. The after is forcing them to face that their relational patterns create life where they're surrounded by people but known by no one, where they have many acquaintances but no one who really sees them, where they're never truly alone but always lonely, because loneliness isn't about presence of people but about absence of connection. The before and after is marking them in ways other people are noticing. Friends and family see them as different now, sadder, more withdrawn, less present even than their usual defended baseline. The change is visible enough that people are commenting on it, asking if they're okay, expressing concern about how they're doing. And the avoidant is having to navigate these expressions of concern, while hiding what's actually wrong, while pretending they're fine when they're not fine, while maintaining their defended exterior even as the interior is crumbling under weight of losing you. The performance of being okay when they're devastated is exhausting in ways that's making the after even more difficult. They can't get support for their grief about losing you, because getting support would require admitting they're grieving, admitting they were attached, admitting you mattered enough that losing you destroyed something in them. The hiding of their pain about you is isolating them further, creating loneliness on top of loneliness, where they're alone without you, and also alone with their grief, because they can't share the grief without contradicting their defended identity. The ways they're romanticizing what you had now that it's gone. The avoidant is remembering the relationship through rose-colored filter that removes all the problems and highlights all the good parts. While you were there, they focused on incompatibilities, on what wasn't working, on reasons the relationship was difficult for them. They catalogued your flaws, noted all the ways you were too needy or too demanding or too much. But now that you're gone, now that the relationship is over, the memory is being filtered differently. They're remembering how you laughed, how you made them feel, how comfortable they were with you. They're remembering the good conversations, the easy moments, the times when being with you felt perfect. The flaws they used to focus on have disappeared from the memory, and what remains is idealized version of the relationship where everything was good and they were happy and they threw it away through their fear and their patterns. The romanticization is making them believe the relationship was better than it actually was, and this belief is making the loss feel even more devastating. If they remembered accurately, remembered how much they withdrew, how often they disappointed you, how consistently they failed to meet you, they might be able to accept the ending as inevitable consequence of incompatibility or incapacity. But the romanticized memory is making them believe they lost something perfect, something that was working, something that they destroyed through their defended state, rather than through any actual problem with the relationship. The false memory of perfection is increasing their regret because it's making them believe they made a terrible mistake by not being able to show up for a relationship that was otherwise ideal, when the reality is the relationship wasn't ideal. It was workable if they'd done their work. But it wasn't perfect, and the problems were real even if they're not remembering them accurately now. The romanticization includes imagining version of relationship that could have existed if they'd been different. And this imagined relationship is becoming more real to them than the actual relationship was. They're imagining what it would be like if they could have been vulnerable with you, if they could have shown you what they felt, if they could have met your needs and built partnership with you. The imagined relationship is perfect because imagination doesn't include the reality of how hard it would have been for them to actually be that vulnerable, actually sustain that presence, actually overcome their patterns enough to meet you consistently. They're falling in love with fantasy version of relationship that never existed and never could have existed without years of therapeutic work they haven't done. And falling in love with fantasy is making the actual loss more painful because they're not just grieving what they had, they're grieving what they imagined they could have had, which is loss compounded by loss of possibility. The romanticization is also making everyone else seem insufficient by comparison to idealized memory of you. The new people they're meeting aren't as understanding as they remember you being, aren't as patient, aren't as perfect. But the comparison is unfair because they're comparing real people with flaws to idealized memory, where your flaws have been removed and only your virtues remain. The unfair comparison is ensuring that no one you can measure up, which is keeping them stuck in the past with you, which is preventing them from actually moving forward, even though moving forward is what they need to do. The romanticization is trap of their own making. They're making you perfect in memory, and perfect in memory is impossible to compete with, which means they're trapped comparing everyone to fantasy version of you rather than to actual person you were. What happens to them if they never do the work to change? If the avoidant never pursues therapy, never addresses their patterns, never does the deep work that would develop capacity they're currently lacking, your letting go becomes first of many losses that follow the same pattern. They'll meet someone new eventually, someone they connect with, someone who's patient enough to deal with their limitations initially. And they'll repeat exactly what they did with you. They'll be defended, they'll maintain distance, they'll fail to show up in ways that partnership requires. The new person will eventually reach their limit just like you reached yours. The new person will let go just like you let go. And the avoidant will experience the same shock, the same panic, the same grief about losing someone through their patterns. The pattern will repeat with the next person and the next person, creating accumulation of losses that all follow same script, all teach same lessons, all prove that their defended state is incompatible with sustainable partnership. The accumulation of losses will make them increasingly bitter and cynical about relationships. After losing you and the next person and the person after that, all through the same patterns, the avoidant will start constructing narrative that relationships don't work, that people are fundamentally unreliable, that vulnerability always leads to pain. The narrative will protect them from facing that they're the problem, that their patterns are what's destroying their relationships, that the common denominator in all these losses is them and their defended incapacity. But the protective narrative will also ensure they never change, because if the problem is relationships in general rather than their patterns specifically, there's no reason to pursue therapy or do work on themselves. The bitterness will make them harder to love, more defended, more convinced that staying isolated is preferable to risking connection. And the convincing will create self-fulfilling prophecy, where their bitterness prevents connection, and the lack of connection confirms that relationships don't work and people can't be trusted. Without doing the work, the avoidance future includes increasing isolation and loneliness, that they'll pretend is choice, but that's actually consequence. They'll spend their later years alone, telling themselves they prefer it that way, constructing elaborate justifications about why solitude is superior to partnership. But underneath the justifications will be profound loneliness, accumulated regrets about destroyed relationships, specific memories of you and others they lost through being unable to meet them. The loneliness will be heavier in later years because it will include recognition of time wasted, of opportunities missed, of people who wanted to love them but who they pushed away through their defended state. They'll look back on losing you as turning point they didn't take, as moment when they could have chosen to change but chose their patterns instead, as loss that could have motivated transformation but instead just became first in series of losses that defined their relational life as tragedy of their own making. The future without therapy also includes the avoidant carrying you, specifically as the one who got away, as the standard everyone else is measured against and found wanting, as the person they loved most and lost through their incapacity. You'll occupy a special place in their memory and their regret, not because the relationship was actually better than their other relationships, but because your letting go was the most complete, the most final, the most impactful in terms of forcing them to confront their patterns. You'll be the one they think about in their lowest moments, the one they wonder about years later, the one they construct fantasies about running into and having another chance with. But the fantasies will remain fantasies because you'll have built entire life without them. We'll have found someone who could meet you. We'll be so far past the relationship with them that even if they've finally done therapeutic work and developed capacity, it will be too late because you'll be unavailable in a permanent way that makes their eventual capacity irrelevant to your life. The truth about whether you're letting go will change them. Your letting go created conditions where change is possible. The pain is severe enough, the loss is significant enough. The lessons are clear enough that the avoidant could use this as catalyst for pursuing therapy and transforming their patterns. But possible doesn't mean probable. Most avoidants don't change even when they lose someone important. Most avoidants experience the pain of loss and respond by defending more thoroughly rather than by becoming more vulnerable, by protecting themselves against ever caring this much again, rather than by developing capacity to sustain caring. The defensive response to pain is easier than the transformative response, because defending requires no vulnerability, no therapeutic work, no confronting wounds they've spent lifetime avoiding. Transformation requires all those things, requires sustained discomfort over years, requires admitting they're broken and need professional help. Most avoidants choose the easier path of deeper defense, even though the easier path leads to more isolation, more losses, more pain in the long run. Whether your letting go changes them depends entirely on whether they can tolerate enough pain to seek help, rather than just tolerating pain while staying defended. Some pain motivates change, some pain just gets endured. The avoidant is in pain about losing you. That's undeniable. But enduring pain while staying defended is what avoidants do. They're practiced at sitting with discomfort while maintaining their defended state, at surviving emotional pain without letting the pain drive them toward vulnerability that would relieve it. Your letting go created the pain, but the pain alone doesn't create change. The pain plus willingness to be vulnerable enough to pursue therapy, plus sustained commitment to therapeutic work over years. That combination creates change. And most avoidants never achieve that combination even when the pain is severe, even when the loss is devastating, even when the lessons are undeniable. The truth is that your letting go will teach them regardless of whether they change. They'll learn that their patterns have costs. They'll learn that patience runs out. They'll learn that some people leave permanently. They'll learn that loving someone doesn't make you capable of being with them. All of these lessons are being delivered through your absence, whether they grow from the lessons or just harden against them. But learning without changing is common outcome. The avoidant learns the lessons intellectually, while remaining emotionally unable to act on what they've learned. Knows what they should do while being incapable of doing it. Understands that patterns destroy relationships while being unable to change the patterns. Your letting go is teaching them, but teaching isn't the same as transforming. They're being taught. Whether they transform is their choice, and it's choice most avoidants never make, even when the teaching is delivered through losing person who mattered most. You let go, and what happened is you freed yourself while creating a situation where the avoidant might finally face themselves, might finally pursue the help they need, might finally transform. But you didn't let go to change them. You let go to save yourself, and saving yourself was right choice regardless of what your letting go does or doesn't do to them. They're experiencing shock, panic, grief, lessons being forced through your absence. All of that is their process to navigate. Your process is continuing to build life without them, continuing to move forward with clarity. That relationship that required you to be only one trying was relationship that needed to end. You let go. What happened to them is consequence they created through their patterns. What happened to you is freedom you created through your boundaries. The consequences are theirs. The freedom is yours. And that's exactly how it should be.